remember my senior year. Started fall of 2007, 2011. Late August. By that time, I was still kind of recovering from my summer at MIT. Yeah, I worked real hard over the summer. Got a little tired along the way. That year, I only needed one class to graduate. Chem 223 Quant Lab. Other than that, I was taking graduate level coursework. Just to prepare myself for grad school, right? At least that was the logic. I ended up taking Chem 535, which was organic synthesis with Scott Denmark. Man, that was a totally different beast. I remember in the first week, I got more information in that class than I did in Orgel 2 as an undergraduate. It's ridiculous. A ridiculous amount of information. And I thought I was just supposed to memorize it all. So that's what I did, right? So the semester goes on. The amount of information just continues to increase. So I felt a little overwhelmed at that point, so I started to try to branch out and talk to other people in my class. So some days I would just find, a grad student and ask them to study with them. I remember I found, I think, a first year named Chris in the library, looking through the lecture notes. I asked him if I could sit down. He said yeah, so we started working. I remember him looking at this conjugate addition. So you have a Grignard and a copper salt in the presence of alpha-beta unsaturated carbonyl. And the R group that was originally on the Grignard in the Grignard reagent gets transferred to the beta carbon. And he didn't understand the role of the copper salt. So I told him. The R group gets transferred from magnesium to the copper. The copper coordinates to the pi system of the alpha-beta unsaturated carbonyl. And then the R group gets transferred to the beta carbon to form a new carbon-carbon bond. And he seemed to be in a state of total shock, He asked me how I knew that, and then I just straight up told him I learned that in Orgel 2. Again, continuing to be in a state of shock, he said that he never learned that in his undergraduate institution. I was like, okay, we went to different schools for undergrad, we have different professors. It's not going to be totally weird if they emphasize different things or cover different subjects within the same course. Apparently he didn't think of it that way. I said, I think he just kind of pegged me as a know-it-all. Or maybe he already thought of me as a know-it-all because I was taking a graduate level course as an undergraduate. I'm not entirely sure. Well, anyway, semester goes on and I get invited to this grad school preview at UC Berkeley. And it's a program where they fly out prospective applicants before the application deadline to convince them to, apply to the school. So it's basically like a visitation weekend before the application is due. And I get accepted into the program, right? But there's a small problem. I have a 534 exam, during the same time that I'm supposed to be in Berkeley. So I start studying 2 weeks before the exam is supposed to take place. And I emailed Denmark about, taking the exam early because I'm not going to be in the state of Illinois at the time. He says, no, take it when I get back. I'm like, okay, cool, that's just more time to study, right? So I go out to Berkeley and I study almost the entire time. Every professor or grad student that I met saw me with the 534 notes binder with me in my hand. And every time I had a down moment, I was always flipping through the notes trying to commit everything to memory. I even studied on a plane, up until the point where I fell asleep. But, now I'm back in Champaign. I'm taking the test in what I think was the Denmark group room with Hung Min. He was one of the TAs. I go through the test. I get to the last question. I still remember it. It was an E9 metastasis question. In order to get this question right, I knew I had to work through the mechanism backwards in order to get to a certain intermediate and then move forward in order to get the question right. So that's what I did. I was so confident I got that question right. If I got no other question right in this test, I at least got that one right? So the next day, I'm in the hall with Chi Ting, who was then an undergraduate, now a current graduate student at the UC Berkeley. We're talking about the test, and I see Denmark and Greg Morehouse, another 554 TA, coming out the classroom. Denmark, I asked Greg how I did, and man, I still remember his words. He was all like, he didn't get anything wrong. I swear to fucking God he cheated. I've never been so elated and insulted at the same time. Like, if I do really good at a test, why is it that I have to be a cheater? I studied 2 weeks for that test, man. I worked for it. I thought I earned it. So, me and Chi are looking at each other like, yo, you heard that shit? And inside, I'm just internally celebrating, just giddy with joy, up until the point where I got my test back. And I noticed that I only got a few points over the average. Still in the low 90s. I mean, it counts as an A because I beat the average, but based on what I heard from Greg as he was coming out the classroom in Noise Lab, I would have thought I gotten a lot higher. So I start flipping through the test, and I noticed that I'm getting points marked up from stuff that I at least thought was right. So I go to the last question, and that's the one I know I got right, by the way. I go to the last question, and do you think I got 4 points for it? Nah, I didn't. I was robbed. And I know what you're thinking. Why didn't you just go talk to the professor? Get him to check it. Well, here's the thing. I was already under the understanding that Professor Denmark checks a test after Greg or Hung Min grades them. And I figured that since I have my exam graded and returned back to me, that he already knows what I really got on the test. So I'm thinking now that if you're not going to give me what I earned, why should I work hard? And I was like, nah, fuck that. I'm going to just keep on moving and keep on doing what I'm doing. So I keep on starting to study weeks before the exams start. And, I'm still doing good on the test relative to the average, but there are still certain instances where I just think